So yeah, it's a small game that almost promises to have more. Uh, so it almost tries to do more than it really does. I mean, with regards to the ratio of how much choices there are in such a small game, and with regards to in comparison to how indeed long it is, and it's a bit much. In other words, um, it's basically just a choice-based game, and indeed lots of choices, lots of you know, yeah, very very weird endings. It's like a mini visual novel, of course. The problem is, of course, it's very short and doesn't do as much as it almost promises. Like what do we, if you did play through the series, any one of the series, and what does one think of as soon as dragons are thought of? Breath of Fire, right? Now, Breath of Fire keeps on going for generally much longer than that. So, yeah, that's the thing. It's also, I mean, very little it has, it's just, well, obviously it's mostly focused on, something that, relates to romance. Just ever so slightly something, but, you know, it doesn't really translate. I mean, obviously, the ending there just says, oh, after 150 years. So yeah, it gives that sort of suspension of disbelief, I suppose. But within the game itself, it doesn't really do much, does it? Like generally, romantic relationships are built up, not just suddenly, you know, immediately thrown into them, and to go from most games at least do not obviously have this thing where uh one potential partner in a relationship actually ends up killing another, because of course they kill them. Then there's no such thing as the relationship, and most games do not simply have lots of choices that necessitate starting the game anew. But that's another problem. I mean, the fact it didn't have a save or load. I don't know why. What's the point? Why does one need to start from the very start? They could just that's the brilliant thing with RPGs. You just save, you load, and then try other choices. You don't need to start anew, especially if you already chose all the possible options. So you don't need any other choices to try. Then it becomes a hassle, So that's the problem. So yeah, it's not self-contained either. The thing that I tried to hint at the beginning, it promises more than it has. I think ideally when games are short, through some sort of artificial restriction, they are self-contained. I think, in my opinion. So they're not just they don't just promise more than they have, or even. I mean, the scope is limited. It's like a Rubik's cube, That's I think the ideal short game. Self-contained, ideally within its own universe. Of I suppose it can also be a branch, a twig out of some larger game, but then there's still the problem of it not being necessarily self-contained. Although you could have it still relatively self-contained, as long as it doesn't rely on narrative wise on the larger game. Just like an OVA with anime series. Well, some OVA, some are self-contained, not some others, I guess. So maybe not great example because they're not generally, but movies though, movies are, yeah, with anime movies generally they are self-contained. Not always still, but generally they are. I suppose, I don't know, but generally they have their own story and so yeah. No, there's another issue as well. I mean, there are typos, so I'm not expecting perfection, but there are some typos, some that could be even spell checked. So I mean, a spell check could easily catch them, as opposed to grammatical errors, which are harder for a spell checker to catch. Which there are some of those as well, so necessarily easy to catch those, but yeah, it's a bit difficult when it comes to. I try to look past typos and such. I really try to. If the game is self-contained, and is relatively fun, which it's not like this wasn't. I mean, it had something. It had a bit of romance, but it didn't really. I mean, even the little bit it had, it was a little bit, I mean, just like the elf said, after all, the appetite is sort of gone as soon as you deal with issues. It's not like it was graphic, but it was obviously described and implied, as in when she said that. It's not very romantic in my opinion, and the fact that it had to happen every time as well in order to get to the ending there, to different endings. And I don't even know what the point is after the apples were got. I mean, if she had the apples, why did she want to do that? Bit of a strange choice, I guess, when it comes to the latter part of the game. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Otherwise, it's sort of, it's still interesting to be reminded of Little Fire. It's still one of my favorite series. But of course, this dragon here isn't quite the younger kind of type of dragon, I guess, that Little Fire usually has with Ryu. Yeah, otherwise, it's reminiscent of. There weren't any battles, which is necessarily a bad thing. I don't necessarily like them, but the battle with the Emperor and Breath of Fall was unforgettable, I suppose. Yeah, and his castle. Anyway, yeah. So that's unrelated, but as much as it was at any rate, as far as as far as I know, I got everything. Yeah, all the choices. I even tried wasting the money at the end at one point just to see if there's anything else, but apparently there's just a dead end then at the end without any end at all. If you waste money, which is a bit, I don't know. It's like money can be wasted. Well, why is there absolutely nothing there? Just a sandbox that is just a dead end. The end there without being able to save or load or anything except quit the game. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, it's yeah.